Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another round of sound. This is year number 25 of the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. Thank you so much for watching all these years. I'm Bob Pompeani. We have a lot to get into today. And, of course, our #1 topic on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be the Pittsburgh Steelers, who won today, 32-13. Here to talk about it, Jeff Hathhorn, 93.7 The Fan, Mark Kaboly, the Pat McAfee Show, and Chris Adamski from Trib Live. And so, first of all, I find it difficult to see how did the Raiders beat the Ravens in Baltimore? When I watch the NFL sometimes, I come away scratching my head on some of these out. But that's the kind of team
they had Devontae Adams in that game.
Okay, but they still
and Jacoby Myers.
Still.
And Gardner Minshew.
Gardner Minshew wasn't even good enough to
Minshew.
do it. My point being, they're not a very good team. And take nothing away from the Steelers. They did what they had to do. However, what's your biggest takeaway from this game today, Jeff, to get to 4-2?
The defense made plays when they had to, forced turnovers. The key red zone, I mean, T.J. Watt said they didn't want him to be a superhero. He didn't have to be Superman with all the injuries on the other side. Yet, there he was being Superman. I mean, that's one of the things that stood out to me.
Mark?
Well, there's a couple things for me. Number one would be Najee Harris finally having that breakout game for the first time in a couple years, actually. He actually looked like a #1 draft pick, and that's great going forward. But there's a little negative side to that, too, with the injury to Zach Frazier. Where do you go? At what point is breaking point of that offensive line? Now you've lost potentially 4 guys now. I mean, eventually that's going to catch up with you. If you got Ryan McCollum now in there right now as your starter. So there's 2 takeaways for me.
Yeah, you guys are taking a lot of First of all, the Raiders do stink. I mean, they were terrible today, at least. T.J. Watt, I thought it was very fascinating what he said about being able to affect the game, not getting sacks, not even creating pressure on the quarterback. Another way to define he can do that. And that's one thing, he gets credit for his sacks, and he's one of the best pass rushers probably of his generation, but he can also do things, and the forced fumble is an art. And he does it better than maybe anybody of his generation as well. And you see some of those things. Yes, the offensive lines, attrition. I thought the officiating was really bad in the Steelers' favor. Yeah. I mean, if this was the other way around.
Remember this. Remember this for the times the Steelers get hosed.
Exactly.
And you say they never get a call.
If all the calls that happened against them today, we'd be talking about that.
But it did help the Steelers tremendously today, because here's an interesting question I have for you guys. And it may be totally irrelevant, but we saw when was it? Jets game at halftime where they were losing. Kenny Pickett got inserted into a game, and a lot of people were surprised it happened. Now, I know Mike Tomlin wanted to get him in the game. But let's say that interception stands, Chris Adamski, right? Let's say that there was no roughing the passer call. They go into the locker room trailing 7-6. There's been a lot of talk and commotion about what happens with Russell Wilson. He's close. Now is he going to play? Do you think there could have been a change at that point if that stood? In
game, I do think it's interesting the way that there's been a lot of Justin Fields turn, whether it be the bad snaps that they fall on, which is all the credit to them, but he's not had a lot of turnovers that he might have had at other points.
No, he's been good about protecting the football, which is why he's still in there.
He's been better, I think, than anybody thought or should have expected to thought as a quarterback. But he's also gotten, I guess, some luck. I don't want to say it, but I mean that interception should have been on him. Things like that have happened, and I don't know if the switch would have happened in game. That would have been an interesting thing, especially. It wasn't like the game was out of hand at that point, but I do think at this point I'm leaning toward there might be a quarterback change sooner rather than later.
Ooh. I don't think they pull him at that point. I don't think there's much of anything Fields would have been able to do for them to pull him at that time, because they need him later in the season. They're going to need him either later in the season, either next year, and I don't think he was playing that bad to be able to yank him at that point. However, if they were going to ever pull him, it was that 3-play span early in the third quarter when he overthrew Freiermuth and Pickens and they had to rely on the field goal. At that point, you're scratching your heads thinking, okay, this might be the time, but I don't think they're going to pull him. I don't think they're going to pull him regardless. I mean, I think whoever starts is going to finish the game. Now, that's up for debate. I don't think he really is going to go towards Russell, even though I think he should. But I think he'll stand pat.
Yeah, I think the Trubisky a couple years ago was an extreme. They wanted to get Kenny in the game. It was their excuse to finally get him into the game. I don't think they would have made a move in this one, even though they believe in Russell Wilson or he wouldn't be on the team, but I don't think they would have made a change.
I remember Mitch got benched in Indianapolis last year because he was just so bad and the team was so bad at that point.
But he wasn't a part of their future, Justin.
No, but
maybe.
Russell Wilson was part of the plan coming here. He was a pole position guy, so I think they do want to see what he could do. Keep in mind, he had 20 touchdowns and 1 interception in the red zone. That's what he does. He goes through his progressions and does it pretty well. I think Justin Fields doesn't do that as well. His legs certainly help him. And that's if he doesn't make mistakes and he keeps drives alive because of his legs, I think he still continues to play.
All right, think about that touchdown, the first touchdown where Fields goes left. If he would have gone through his progressions, which he did, neither receiver was open. What happens to Wilson in that play?
I get it.
Probably gets sacked.
The legs.
Fields scores a touchdown.
Exactly. But both guys were covered. But there were also, Mark, guys who were open today.
Yeah,
and he did not see them.
I mean, if you could somehow morph the two together, it would be like the perfect quarterback, right? And I don't think you're able to do that quite yet. Maybe science, UPMC, maybe they can figure out how to do that in a couple years or so. But yeah, I mean, it's tough with Justin because eventually he's going to have to try to.
But it's a passing league, right?
He's going to have to win the game throwing the ball, right? And eventually, I mean, you're in the second half of the season when you're playing Baltimore, Philly, Kansas City, Baltimore twice, even Cincinnati, you're going to have to throw the ball to be able to win. And right now, through 6 games, we don't know if he can do it. Right now, it's no, he can't.
I totally agree with that. He does have 5 rushing touchdowns, though.
Which is impressive.
Yes, which is a pace.
What I'm saying, merge them together somehow.
Yeah, it's like, but you're right. To be at 98 passing yards late into the fourth quarter, it's just something. It's an unsustainable formula. You can't just go through a season and expect to get places and go into the playoffs and win a playoff game, which is the stated goal for this team, if that's the kind of passing yards production you're getting. So that's why I feel like it's unsustainable. I think you have 2 home games here before a bye, and then you can always make a switch back or whatever it is at that point. I think it might be the good time to do it.
Yeah, that schedule, Jeff, let's talk about that too. They have the Jets and the Giants back-to-back at home, and then a bye week. And then they have a chance to, be 6-2 heading into the teeth of the schedule. So these 2 games, they're night games. They typically win these kind of games at home. I would imagine they have to do that. You don't want to see a split.
So if you're saying that they get to 6-2, you can't make a quarterback change in the bye week.
It depends on, to me, it would depend on how the play is.
But if they're 6-2.
I know. Winning is their business. I've heard Mike say it, and I understand it. It is, and he wins. But he wins with help in a lot of different areas. It's not like he's winning in the pass game, because the pass game still is a major problem.
There are times, and you guys brought up those 3 passes in the third quarter, where I'm like, I just want to see it. I'm intrigued to see what would Russ look. Would it look that much better, or would some of the other faults of the offense really come to roost?
Didn't you have that same feeling against the Cowboys for a series? Didn't you have that same feeling against the Colts for a series where it's like, oh, this is the time, man. He's really struggling here. So you're going to have to throw the ball, and I don't think he's capable of doing it consistently. My thought is, and I might be joking halfway, Pump, but maybe switching back and forth, maybe not series-wise, but situationally wise. Ooh. I mean, if you're in the red zone, why don't you put him in?
After midnight takes, some hot
like
takes.
I don't like it, but you have to do something, right?
I think Tuesday at noon you ought to ask all these hypotheticals.
I don't believe in hypotheticals.
I do think it doesn't have to be a permanent change. I mean, people see the potential of Fields, what Fields does well. I think Fields has shown a really good attitude for approaching this. I think his demeanor has been a pleasant surprise to me, not knowing him or following the Bears enough over the years, that I think that he would be okay to. I mean, remember, Russell Wilson, as even a couple years ago, was an iconic NFL quarterback. I think there is some sort of respect there that it wouldn't be end of the world if he sat down, and if that doesn't work out, you can go back to Fields.
We've got to go to break on that note.
Why you don't bench him?
Interesting debate. We'll come back and talk about George Pickens, who was targeted today more than he was last week, but he only had 3 catches to lead all receivers. Again, that passing game, we'll get into that and more as we continue right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. We're live tonight in the 25th anniversary season. We're back talking about a Steelers win today, 32-13. That has them tied with the Ravens at 4 wins, 2 losses, coming home. Back-to-back New York teams in here over the next 2 weeks. And one of the interesting developments was George Pickens after what happened last week with snap management. Jeff, that changed today, but it took a while. He got 8 total for the game, only 3 catches, a couple of drops. What is the state of George Pickens, and what can they do to help him get back to where they want him to be?
Well, you hope that catch at the end, which was underthrown or it would have been a touchdown, maybe gets something going for him, that 31-yarder. But there were some drops. I think they did target him in the first half, probably intentionally. There was one play where he was well covered, and it was a good defensive play against him. I mean, it's not an offense where receivers going to have monster numbers, even the #1 receiver. I mean, it's just when they're winning, they're running the ball and relying on their defense.
Isn't that an indictment on the quarterback, though, to tie this together?
Oh, no,
Could be an indictment on the receivers.
Well, how about this? Chris Hoke on our postgame show, he tends to focus in only on Pickens and every now and then Freiermuth and nobody else. If you look at the breakdown of catches, nobody else gets involved in the pass game.
Well, that assumes that anybody else is getting open. I mean,
Well, maybe so, but I'm just saying it has to be more than that, doesn't it? That goes in hand with Justin Fields.
I'd like to get Pickens the ball more. You know, let me tell you something. 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, we'd be absolutely sitting here roasting Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown if they were forcing the ball to, like they did to George Pickens with 2 minutes, 3 minutes left in that game. They were just trying to appease him late in that game, throwing the ball to him, 2 or 3 times in that last 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, they did.
Obviously, they know there's something going on there. They wanted to make him feel good. I mean, but it's at the time or their place. Like I said, we'd be roasting on the other quarterback for doing that right now. George has to grow up a little bit and say, okay, I didn't get any catches, but we're winning 32-13. Who really cares?
And I guess, I mean, has there been, I know I wasn't there, so I mean, has there been a sign of that he was upset? I mean, that's the thing, is they won the game.
Short answer.
Let's hope
there
not.
were
You could
situations.
tell he didn't want to talk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Najee
well,
Harris,
I
for that
mean,
matter. You
that's-
could tell he was a little bit defensive.
He's very
At least
combative.
there wasn't a sideline blow up or anything like that.
Neither of those guys were that different than they normally are.
Yeah, I don't.
Nah, George
Yeah,
is definitely a little grumpier.
But he's been kind of this way all
He's
year.
not the one-word answer
He's
cliche
been,
like
been
he
most of the
was.
way. Even in training camp, he didn't have long answers. So he's not that different from that standpoint. And Najee's always been, he says he speaks his mind, tells the truth too much. He's always been unique.
I say combative.
I'm just.
What do
I
you
guess
mean
what
by
I'm
that?
making is there's progress from last week with the Pickens situation. There wasn't a face mask grab. There wasn't
Right.
a
Plus, he
helmet
talked
throw.
after the game for the
He
first
talked
time
after
ever.
the game.
Or
We didn't
this
have
year.
no eye black this time.
But I don't
so
think this stuff really
baby steps,
matters
right?
to these guys. I really don't. I think they look at it and say, that's just George. I don't think they walk in that room and he's some kind of problem. I just think
Put it this way: if there was no incident today, that's a plus. That's a step in
That's
the
what I
right
mean.
direction,
Exactly. But what did he get?
So-
2 catches for 26 yards and late into the
3
fourth
for-
quarter,
yes,
and
3
until you got to the end there. I don't like. Would he have been more upset if he ends with that?
Maybe he should
be?
just start blaming for
I mean-
8 guys in the box for his lack of success. Wait, that's the running back that does that.
I thought Jalen Warren got into the game. I thought I'd expect more from him. I know it's his first game back from injury, but he had 6 rushes for 7 yards, Jeff. I thought his best play was recovering that fumble, that backward pass thing.
Yeah,
Because it was a
that was a nice
bad
play.
pass. It went right through his hands. It was too hot to handle, but he recovered it.
So you're
Other
saying it
than
was
that-
a bad throw by Fields again?
Well, I thought it was,
it was
too
a
hot.
bad throw. It was.
It was.
The play was blown up. He should have done something else like that. But he tried to fire it in there. That was a bad throw. Yeah, I mean, Jalen it just wasn't there for him today.
All I say is what happens when these things turn into turnovers,
Well-
which eventually is going. You can't beat the odds.
Can't
this
lay
bad.
off the quarterback.
You
It's always
can't.
back
You
to the quarterback.
You cannot beat the odds like he's been beating them, Justin. He might as well go play the
But
lottery.
he asked about Jalen.
I'm just telling you. You're talking about the backward pass.
Yeah,
We're
if
talking
those
about
blow
5
up in there-
fumbles that he's recovered. We're talking
right
about
about
5 or 6 picks that should have happened that have not happened.
And
You're not gonna live that way.
The fact we haven't mentioned Ryan McCollum yet, and he didn't do anything bad. He didn't get totally beat or blown up or something. If that's the future, at least the immediate future, I mean, that could affect all this. The quarterback, what decision you make at quarterback, the running game,
Spencer Anderson,
throwing the ball
perimeter.
downfield. If you have to go to the new center now, which maybe the one guy who's played every game at this point.
Every snap, he's playing well. So.
All right, we got to go to break. When we come back, we'll get back to the NFL next segment, but up next will be Pitt and Penn State, both ranked in the top 20 for the first time in a long, long time, both undefeated. We'll get into that next right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. How about this? Pitt is 6-0, coming off a win against Cal the other day, and Penn State went to USC, trailed by 14 points, came back and won in overtime, so they're both 6-0. Mark Kaboly, I want to ask you this to start this segment. So there's a 12-team playoff. So 4 conference champions get there, and then seeding and everything else takes place. Who has a better shot of getting there from their respective conferences, Pitt or Penn State?
I think Penn State, just for the fact is I think they can lose a game and still back in through the back, obviously the back door.
Just like
there.
Ohio State did.
Yes, I don't think Pitt can do that. Pitt's going to have to run the table to get in. If you lose any of your games, if it's BC, SMU, whoever it is, you're not going to be in that top 12. Penn State can theoretically go 9-0, whatever, play Ohio State, lose a close game, and still get in as 11 or 12.
It depends who the loss is to.
Yeah.
I mean, if they beat Clemson, that's going to be huge on their resume. So a loss at SMU, who may be ranked at some point, or Virginia's having a good year, or at BC who's having a good year, maybe it doesn't look so bad if you get that Clemson win. But I think they have to get that.
There's only one regular season loss. The odds are pretty good they'll be in the ACC title game, though, at that point then, which would be a resume builder then at that point, because then you're playing Miami. Now, if they get there and play Miami and they're undefeated, then they're probably in anyway, I guess. So that's kind of if you lose 1 or 0, you're playing in the ACC title game, and you might lose another one.
So which one is it? Pitt or Penn State? You're talking all around it.
I mean, the Big Ten will probably get 3 or 4 teams, so I guess that's it. And I'm sure Penn State will lose to Ohio State because that happens every year.
Yeah, but Ohio State's now lost to 4 straight top 5 teams when they play.
Is that a dig at you?
And I guess Penn State will be top 5 at that point, actually.
It is, and that game the other day was.
Ohio State's not a national championship team. They have an average quarterback. You can't have an average quarterback.
You think with that NIL money, they'd have one better.
Championship.
Right?
All right. Speaking of NIL money, since this was brought up last week at Pat Narduzzi's press conference, he was asked about Eli Holstein, and we know this is a new world. It's NIL money. He's here. He's getting paid to be here this year, but I think he really wants to be here. The opportunity was such, he earned it. He left Alabama where he was stacked in line with other guys. So, Jeff, what would it take for Pitt to keep him here? Pat Narduzzi said the answer is simply this. You could play for a championship and win a Heisman here. You could do that a lot of places, too.
Yeah.
Doesn't money become the big issue?
It's the only issue.
Yes.
It's not what the facilities look like. It's not what his class schedule is. It's a chance to win, but how much money am I getting?
Yeah.
And that's not an indictment on Eli. It's like, it's the business.
You have to look for the future of yourself. You have to be self-preservation. I mean, you could have one good season, then be garbage for 3 years, be a 7th-round pick, and make no money, or go to Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, wherever, go back to, and get $3-4 million. That money's always going to be in the bank. You go where the money is.
Because you know this, those other schools are watching what Eli's doing.
Oh, there's no question.
And they're pulling out the cash.
And they see how he's won.
And this isn't even a knock on Pitt or Pat Narduzzi or anything, but I mean, you actually just said it. You can win a national title. I mean, let's face it, all these programs that would have the donors or whatever it is to pay him, they're probably more blue blood type programs that probably have a better chance than Pitt is to win a national title and get the exposure to be a win a Heisman.
Who's in front of you now? If he does this year, he would come back as the incumbent. I don't think there'll be any challenges to it.
But I do think if they do win, then that's going to excite the donors. They're going to raise more money in the 412 Alliance, so they'd be able to pay guys.
That would be good. That's what it takes. It's a whole new world, as they say down in Disney. All right, we're going to take a break, come back. Observations about the NFL at large. That's next, right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. It was a busy day in the NFL, so we're going to ask these guys here their biggest takeaway globally about the NFL. Jeff, what's the biggest thing that struck you today about the league?
That the Ravens are really good. They've got options. They got a run game and a dynamic runner in Henry. That Lamar is good. They've got a receiver in Zay. They've got multiple tight ends. Their offense is a machine.
Is that globally? I'm more looking, welcome back to the offense. You remember the first couple of weeks how the scoring's been down? 51 from the Buccaneers, 47 from the Lions. Everybody else are in the 30s at some point, unless you're watching the Bengals and Giants. Steelers are scoring 32. The points are back.
Well, in some cases, but I still think if we're sitting here debating, and this is, Justin Fields hasn't been the superstar, really dynamic, might bench him. Guys like Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones. I mean, there's been a lot of bad quarterbacks, and we can complain and say Justin can throw some better balls or whatever, but he's been better than a lot of guys. Some guys even higher, Q scores than him, or much higher salaries than him too. And the Watson thing is just a total mess.
It's unbelievable, and they're stuck with him. They can't do much. All right, I have something for you. If you would like to do much with your car game, if you're considering an electric vehicle, but you're worried about the cost of a home charger, #1 Cochran Kia is here to help you. When you buy or lease a new EV this October, you will get $1,500 credit toward your charger purchase and installation. Plus, their partner Treehouse can handle all the permitting and installation. This offer is available only at #1 Cochran Kia, so mention this ad when you buy. Shop electric vehicles now at CochranKia.com. Almost out of time. Before we go, real quick, guys. Steelers, Jets, who wins?
Steelers win 21-17, and Tomlin does wink at Aaron Rodgers.
I don't think anymore. Go ahead, Mark.
Jets coming off a bye. I think the Jets win. Don't know the score yet.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Coming off a bye, too. And a new coach. That could hurt or help. Chris?
16-12 Steelers. Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, combined age of, 80 years old or at that point almost like that? Imagine the storyline if Russell Wilson starts on Sunday Night Football.
You never know.
There you go with the quarterback.
Aaron Rodgers
Sunday
now.
night, we'll be back live again because of it, so join us for the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. Thanks to our panel. We'll see you again next Sunday night.